What's up, guys and girls? Today I'm going to be talking about a series that I feel like is one of those book series that I was always astounded never really got adopted into a motion picture film and just shown to the world. And I was always astounded why it never got as big as Harry Potter, because I felt it was just as good. It was in a very similar genre and it had its own unique spin that was very different from Harry Potter and yet similar in certain ways. And this is one of those series I really feel like is one of the best book series in fiction that I have ever read. And I'm just astounded. If I had the resources and capability of making this into a movie, a TV series, I would. And I could do either. Similar to Game of Thrones, although the TV series would probably only last a season, maybe two, I feel like it has some potential. And film series for sure. And so the series is called the Bartimaeus trilogy, and it is a series that I have to just tell you guys what it's about, because I really owe this to the author who made this series, because it is such an amazing series. And I really hope that he makes some more of these, or like a sequel trilogy or some related trilogy to this, because it's like one of those things that alas, it never got to that magnitude of popularity. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the author is happy with how well it's done so far. In fact, I probably wouldn't have heard about it if it wasn't on top of one of the my local library sort of paperback summer reading list catalog pamphlets or whatever. And so this is literally one of the best things ever. Literally, if I just describe it to you, I really think that you would just be hooked on it. And there's so much about it, so I'll just get started. Here's the scene. And as a disclaimer, I haven't read this for a while now, a few years, so some of these may be slightly off. But here's the scene. It is set in a world very similar to ours, but the biggest difference is that the elite class have these things called the Jinni, and there are magicians who can summon these things called the Jinni. They're not always called the Jinni. Sometimes the higher level classes are called other things like demons, and then there's lower classes called stuff like sprites and other things. But generally, the middle class ones are called the Jinni. And basically, these magicians are regarded as these. If you're a magician, you're renowned, and based on your level of skill as a magician, you're generally known as a very upper class individual, and you typically serve the government, and you either know someone who's a magician and you hire the magician, or you're a magician yourself. That's how the upper class works in this sort of aristocrat, affluent level of society. And I think it's set in England. And basically, the general idea is that what you can do is summon the Jinni to do stuff for you, whether it's chores or errands. Obviously, it depends on the level that you can summon. Just by common sense, you would think that the sprite could probably only deliver a message before you had to dismiss it, which pretty much means you end the summoning. And then there's higher level ones, middle class ones, like Bartimaeus, who's one of the central characters in the story, who has all sorts of abilities. Mainly, he can shapeshift into literally anything he wants and do the bidding of the master. The problem, though, and here's the thing, to summon the Jinni, you have to draw out these intricate circle summoning things, and it takes tons of reading and preparation to do properly. And if you mess up, the demon summon can break the seal and then kill you. Depending on the demon, like if it's just a small sprite, it probably couldn't kill you or just like leave, but that's how it works. And so you have to be very careful, and that's how this whole thing was set about. But here's how things break the mold. You have this boy called Nathaniel who's a genius. He's a genius, and so he gets brought in, and basically he summons this beast, this high level, well, mid-tier, the Jinni, and befriends him over a long period of time. They don't become friends immediately, And that's where, like, initially you see some delineation, because before, everyone just wasn't really friends with the demons, and the demons weren't friends with them. And you got Bartimaeus here, who himself has only really experienced friendship from a human one other time in the distant past, and has renounced that and pretty much said that it was a one-time exception and no human will ever be like that again. But the point being, Nathaniel develops this thing, but it's a very interesting dilemma, because you get this friendship thing, and it's more interesting because Bartimaeus, the way the books are written are very unique. You have this third person narration, but every page is marked with a lot of little numbers on random words that represent footnotes. So you have a bunch of footnotes at the bottom of almost every page that pretty much describe in first person Bartimaeus' perspective on the whole experience. So it's very different from the third person objective view, because Bartimaeus brings forth a very, I would call it a very sassy, arrogant, quirky personality to his perspective of what's going on. And that is one thing that not a lot of people have in real life. Most people in real life are pretty average. And average means they'll just stand there, sit there. They don't have that much personality. They're pretty much like a dead rock at times. Not to be mean, but they can be. Bartimaeus is the opposite. He's very sassy. He has his own opinion on things. Somewhat arrogant and always trying to, be quirky and witty and so forth. And so, when they first meet, Bartimaeus is trying to do that. He's trying to do what most of the jinnies do once they're summoned, which is first test out everything. Make sure this fucker who summoned him knows what he's doing. Because just because you summon him properly and you have all the inscriptions right, doesn't mean that you're set. That the genie can make you, if he tricks you in any way, shape, or form, and you say a certain word or you say a certain sentence, that could in fact put forth a loophole which will allow the demon to either do something he pleases, or trick you into either killing you or chopping you off or exploiting some loophole. And I feel like it could have been exploited more based off what I recall of the dialogue and his interactions with Nathaniel on first encounters. But there's it's very interesting to see how Bartimaeus in the footnotes has a perspective on this, because it's very entertaining, because the third person objective is just him saying these stuff, and then in the footnotes it's like, I tried to trick this little kid into doing all this stuff and it didn't work. I tried to tell him that and then like there's this one time when the Bartimaeus is like, he pretends that the kid made a mistake in the inscription when he didn't. And then Nathaniel catches him. He's like, nope, I'm not falling for your stuff. You want me to go over there and like smear the inscription to check if it's right, and thus let you escape and kill me. And Bartimaeus in the footnotes is like, this rascally kid, or something like that. And so you get the point. And so here's how it's even more interesting, because there's like this whole history about it. There's this mighty historical figure called Gladstone, who apparently was this amazing magician who's so heroic, and then spoiler alert, you'll find out later that he's not that great a magician in my opinion. But here's the thing though, Nathaniel was just this boy, and he was picked up at the start by a mentor who's also a magician. The mentor, who was a magician, was a really crappy teacher and was very abusive to Nathaniel, similar to how in Harry Potter, Harry had these sort of somewhat abusive uncles and aunts that took care of him. And so he just did a terrible job, and that's like sort of the initial setting before he summoned Bartimaeus. And what you find is that he did a terrible job. The first thing he tried to teach Nathaniel was how bad these demons were. So he summoned him to his room, scared the shit out of this kid by making him put on these glasses that allowed him to see in a different plane, because that's one of the things that's unique in this book. These demons, not only can they shapeshift and do your bidding, they also have different planes. So what that means is like it's almost like different dimensions. So unless the magician uses these glasses or some other technique, they won't be able to see certain demons on different planes, and only the high class demons can use certain planes. Like the lower class ones will only be able to use like 2 or 3 planes. And so the point is, he summons Nathaniel into this room. It's just an empty, huge library. He makes him put on these glasses, and then he puts them on, and he gets scared shitless because there's like thousands of little djinnis that his master or mentor summoned to scare him and teach him a lesson on how bad these demons are, which is a horrible thing to do. And so he ends up being a horrible teacher, teaching at too slow of a pace. So Nathaniel, being fed up with it, sneaks into his library often and just checks out these advanced books, ultimately summoning Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus, I just think, is an amazing character, because they could have done things differently and made Nathaniel be this amazing genius who summons high-class djinni from the start. But no, he was obviously a genius, but not to that point, at least not that early on. And so they decided, they made it so that Bartimaeus was a mid-tier djinni. And so Bartimaeus just makes it even more fun because of his arrogant attitude. He's very arrogant and self-righteous towards any demon or djinni that is lower tier than him, especially those who are visibly lower tier, like the small sprites that are tiny, or those tiny imps who can only send messages to other people before you dismiss them. And yet when he meets someone who is near his level or somewhat higher, and he knows it's somewhat higher, he'll be kind of arrogant and say, you're not that great, and play it off. And when he knows he's losing a fight, he'll leave, but he won't admit that he's been defeated. And then when he gets to those who are just exceptionally higher tier, which is rare that he'll meet one, because the only people who can summon those are a group of old magicians all together. If you meet one of those, he doesn't even view them as humans. He's just like, wow, look at that thing. And so it's just a very interesting personality. I really think him as a character just brings this whole thing together. And so it's just such a good series. In fact, after I make this video, I'm going to try and contact the author of the series, if he has a Twitter, just to show him this video as my form of thanks. I mean, there's so much that I very much love about this whole series that makes it so unique, and such a shame that it was never made into a film adaptation. But I really don't think that critical acclaim or lots of book sales or film adaptation is required to be proud of your work, or to realize that your work is at the top tier. A good example is all the artists who have died without any sort of renown. Vincent van Gogh, for instance, each of his paintings now worth tens of millions, and yet he died depressed, and no one really even gave a crap about him when he was alive, and he cut off his own ear. It's that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's still so much more I want to say about this, but I don't want to spoil anything, so I can't. But the point is, the first book is called The Amulet of Samarkand, I believe. It's been a while since I read them, and it's about an amulet, but it's not the whole thing. And it's this whole series. It's just very, very interesting. This whole idea, it just came out of nowhere. Nothing I had read was even similar. The planes, the djinni, the demons, sure, there's some similarities, and obviously some of this stuff has been done before in some form. I mean, you see in Naruto, they do summoning techniques too, where there's inscriptions, circular things. But to pull it together in this way is just amazing. And I just love this whole thing. And Bartimaeus, so he's such a character, and there's so much to tell you about him. These demons all have these certain sort of they get summoned a lot in the human world, and they're literally immortal unless I guess they die in the human world. But the point is, Bartimaeus spent most of his time 2,000 years ago in the Egyptian times. That was the bulk of his experience with the human world. And during that time, he was summoned quite a deal. And therefore, even nowadays, in like current day England, a lot of his forms are Egyptian based backgrounds. So even though he can shapeshift into any animal or form, he decides to choose like the Egyptian version just because of his background. And it's just like, it's a natural thing. I feel like if humans had that ability and were placed in that situation, they would do something similar. Because like just like our accents and way of talking, it's just something that's part of us. Another ingenious thing that the author had decided to put in. And so yeah, like given the choice, if he had to shape shift into a pigeon or some sort of Egyptian, you know, crow, he'd choose the crow. Some sort of, if he had to choose some sort of, you know, attacking cat, which I think he does at one point to fight other the Jinni. And that's the thing though, you like what you run into a lot throughout history. He mentions a lot about his past history, and you see him run into a lot of fights. They're typically with other the Jinni. It's always magician versus magician, and they summon these things. And typically it's all surrounding politics or war or corruption of some sort. War or politics, pretty much. And so they're doing their thing. Sometimes it's more petty. It's a lot more petty. Maybe it's just thievery of some sort, but they run into these things where they're fighting other the Jinni or interacting with other the Jinni. And it's interesting because the way he describes the others, sometimes he regards some as pals, some as rivals, some as enemies, but at the same time not really enemies, more like business rivals, because they're always being summoned by rival humans of some sort. And so he regards these people as rivals, and because they have to obey, they usually end up like fighting against each other. And it's interesting because different Jinni have different personalities as well. So he runs into this one Jinni who's like his sort of business rival for thousands of years, and this one's different because unlike Bartimaeus, who is at the end of the day very kind-hearted and a decent human being, this other guy is like ruthless. He'll backstab you if he wants to, and he'll do all this stuff even against the Jinni, because he's sort of first off, he's ordered to, and he's bound by his orders. Second off, he's sort of evolved to enjoy it. And so he meets this guy once again after, you know, another 1,000 years, and it's like the same sort of thing. And so, a long story short, you know, Bartimaeus is quite the character, and I very much like his sort of Egyptian background. Like, there's certain scenes where he could choose to evolve into a grizzly bear or a tiger, but he chooses like an Egyptian what do you call those things? Those black jaguars. He chooses those sort of things, and then like I think in the second book he gets captured into this like a magical jail that every like hour halves in size, and then like the jail is made of this like electric thing that hurts you if you touch it. So Bartimaeus keeps having to shapeshift into something smaller, and everything he shapeshifts into is of Egyptian background. So for instance, scarab beetles and so forth, and like the Jinnis who were hired to capture him, or not hired but like commanded to capture him, start remarking, oh, you must be from the Egyptian times. And then they start listing off all the big Jinni of the day until his name was mentioned. And again, he's so funny. Like his name gets mentioned, but it gets mentioned on the backside, like oh, this was a minor demon of that day and age. Bartimaeus like responds back, I think you've mistaken. I believe that Bartimaeus character was the most renowned demon of the day. How dare you call this guy? And he also mentions like again his rival, the Jinni, how dare you call this guy a super amazing the genie? He was nothing compared to Bartimaeus back in the day, and so forth. And so it's just very funny. And again, this is just my freaking layman's average person's review and discussion of this book. I wish I had the prose and eloquence to describe it perfectly to you and just inspire you, but I hope it's enough to, at least for those 20 people who watched this video, to really have some spark of interest in it, because I really feel like it's such an amazing book, and I've only hit the tip of the iceberg on how amazing this trilogy is. They recently released a prequel, and there's so much I could say, but it spoils so much, so I can't. And so there's so many amazing things about the book that I can't say because it would spoil it. And so this is, long story short, what I have to say in a nutshell about the trilogy. And I really hope he writes more and more of these. And again, it's such a shame that there was no film adaptation and it didn't get as big as Harry Potter. But I don't think it needs to get that big or even close to be called a great book. I know I was definitely influenced by it. I thought it was a great thing, and it's such a shame that a lot of people are just stubborn or don't like reading anymore. I remember back when it was released, 2005, I got it from the library, and the cover was this like the genie of some sort, shapeshift into like this form, which literally looked like this sort of weird, I would say a sort of weird cow with a human body. This weird thing. It looked really cool in my opinion, and I was literally made fun of because of the cover I was reading. It was such a shame, and it was by one of my mom's friend's daughters who was older than me, so you would think she's more mature, who thought she was the shit when she really wasn't, and literally just like was quite Christian and didn't like that whole demon stuff when it really wasn't even demons. And I just felt like she was just too closed off to it, and I feel like if definitely her, she would have liked it if she given it a chance. But again, it's one of those things. Anyhow, I feel like I'm missing something that I really want to say to even cement how much this book is amazing, but I forgot. And I really hope this was enough to convince you guys to check out the book, or at least Google it and see what it's about. It's called the Bartimaeus trilogy. The first one's called Amulet of Samarkand. I am so blessed to have found it. I thought it was an amazing series. I haven't read the fourth one, which is actually a prequel that was recently released 2010. I'm hoping he makes another one. I really feel like it's such a good series, in all honesty, and there's so much to be said about it. Like, I really feel like the universe has just been tapped. There's so much more that can be extrapolated from it. Like, my imagination would go wild. Like, there's so many things you could build off of that. And for him who has such a great personality, like great creativity and imagination, I really feel like he could do so much more about this. And for anyone who's interested in his name is Jonathan Stroud. That's the author of this series. And it really is a great thing. I guess one last thing I do have to mention about is it's very unique in the sense of what Nathaniel does throughout the series. His adventures, what he decides to do. I don't know if I would be able to do that sort of stuff. And his relationship he forms with the people there, and the whole idea of how things work. So I think it's pretty amazing, and that's all I really want to say. Thanks for watching.